Hi third graders, it's Mrs. Burke and I'm here with a video lesson that's gonna go over some more problem solving with area and perimeter. So I'm gonna do 2 examples to show you, and then you're gonna try one on your own. And something really important about area and perimeter problems is even though you're doing distance learning and a lot of it or all of it is on the computer, you're still gonna wanna use a pen and paper to answer these because it's not something you want to do with mental math. Area and perimeter is all about visualizing, and it's best to do that by creating your own diagrams. So I strongly suggest, if you haven't been using a separate piece of paper and a pencil to do your classwork or a whiteboard, that you definitely start doing that. It's going to help tremendously. So let's start. I wrote up a scenario or a situation, and then we're going to work through some questions that might be tailored to the scenario. So in this question it says, below are the measurements of 2 neighbors' backyards. So as you can see, I have Mr. Atkins' yard and Mr. Bradley's yard. And Mr. Atkins' yard measures 7 feet long, 10 feet wide. Mr. Bradley's is a square. It measures 8 yards by 8 yards. So this is my visual picture of it. Now there are some questions that are going to go with this. The first question says, whose yard? So the fact that it says who means my answer has to be a person. Whose yard covers a greater area, and how much greater? So this is a 2-part question, so I need 2 answers. So right away I notice a keyword, and that word would be covers. And I know when I'm talking about covering, it's going to be the inside of a space. So since it's talking about the inside, this is going to be an area question. And I know the formula for area is length times width. So I need to first find the area of both yards. So I'm gonna write my formula. I rewrite it every single time to start. So here, area equals length times width. And I have a length of 7 yards. So area equals 7, and then a width of 10 yards. So 7 times 10, which means it has an area of 70 square yards for Mr. Atkins, okay? Now I'm gonna move over to Mr. Bradley's yard, and I also wanna find the area, which is still length times width. So I'm gonna write my formula. Area equals length times width. And since it's a square, both the length and the width have the same measure. So area equals 8 times 8. And this is a math fact I should at this point have memorized. So area 8 times 8 is 64. And if you don't have that memorized, a little saying I say, 8 times 8, I ate an 8 equals 64 and got sick on the floor. So 8 times 8 is 64. I ate an 8, got sick on the floor. 8 times 8 is 64. Okay, so 64 square yards. So I have just found the area of both Mr. Atkins and Mr. Bradley's yard. So now I'm going to go back to my question. Whose yard covers a greater area? Well, 70 is greater than 64. So this yard belongs to who? Mr. Atkins. So the first part of my question, whose yard covers a greater area? Mr. Atkins' yard. I'll write like this. Mr. Atkins' yard covers a greater area. And the second part of my question, remember, 2 question marks. I need 2 questions and 2 answers. It says how much greater. So that means I'm comparing. I'm comparing Mr. Atkins to Mr. Bradley. And whenever I compare, I always subtract to get my answer. So I'm going to be subtracting the 70 for Mr. Atkins minus the 64 for Mr. Bradley, and the difference is 6. So it is 6 square yards greater. Okay, and the reason it's square yards is because it's an area question. And now the second part of my problem, it's related because it's the same diagram I'm going to refer to, but it might not be talking about this equation. I have to see what the question's asking. The second question wants to know if they wanted to each put a fence around their yard, who would need more fencing? So I know my answer is going to be a person because it says who, right? So I'm not going to tell them a number. But then I also saw 2 key words here. I saw the word fence, and I also saw the word around. So if I'm going around the outside of a figure for a fence, I'm no longer thinking about how much area it covers, but I just want to know the outside, which is the perimeter. So this is going to need a different formula. So to find perimeter, I add up the length plus the length plus the width plus the width. So I'm going to put in my missing measurements here. So if this side is 10 yards, I know this is 10 yards. And if this is 7 yards, I know this is 7 yards because it's a rectangle. Here it's a square, so I know every side will be 8 yards. Okay, so for Mr. Atkins, for the perimeter, it's length plus width, or some of you might say side plus side plus side plus side. So my 2 lengths are going to be 7 plus 7, and then my 2 widths are 10 plus 10. 7 and 7 is 14, 10 and 10 is 20, 14 plus 20 equals 34. So the perimeter is 34 yards. They're not square yards, they're just yards. That's my perimeter for Mr. Atkins. Now let me try Mr. Bradley. I could say perimeter equals 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 and do repeated addition. Or I can use my math fact and use multiplication and say 8 times 4 equals 32 yards. So let me see. Mr. Atkins needs 34 yards of fencing. Mr. Bradley needs 32 yards of fencing. So let me go back to the question. Who will need more fencing? Mr. Atkins will need more fencing. Okay, it's a who question, so Mr. Atkins. All right, let's try another one. We are gonna change the scenario and we're no longer dealing with neighbors' yards. Now we're gonna look at posters in a bedroom. So below are 2 posters that Kevin will hang on his wall. Let's pretend he's decorating his room, and these are 2 posters that he wants to hang on it. All right? So what kind of question could we ask about these? We have poster A and poster B. So my first question says, which poster, so I have to answer either A or B, will use a frame with a larger measure? My key word there is frame, right? Frame. So that tells me if I'm putting a frame on this, I'm going to be going around the outside with a frame, right? So this is really a perimeter question. Which one has a greater perimeter? So this is a rectangle. If this width is 3 feet, this width is 3 feet. And if this length is 2 feet, this length is 2 feet. So to find my perimeter for poster A, perimeter is length plus width, or 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2. And if you do 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3, you'll get the same answer because of the commutative property. So 3 plus 3 is 6, 2 plus 2 is 4, so 6 plus 4 equals 10 feet of framing I'll need for poster A. 10 feet. Let me see poster B. Poster B, if I have a length of 5 feet and a width of 1 feet, let me add length plus length plus width plus width, okay? So I need 5 feet plus 5 feet plus 1 foot plus 1 foot. 5 plus 5 is 10. 1 plus 1 is 2, so I have a total of 12 feet of framing I need. So now back to the question, which poster will use a larger measure for the frame? It's gonna be poster B. All right, that would be my answer, poster B. Now the next question says, which poster, will take up a smaller amount of space on the wall? So if a poster's hanging on your wall, we know that the whole entire poster is going to take up space. It's not just the outside of the poster, but it's the entire poster. So I'm not just looking for the frame of it. I need to know the whole thing, which is going to be an area question. And I know that area equals length times width. So let me find the area of each poster. Area equals length times width. So area equals 3 times 2 for poster A. 3 times 2 is 6. So poster A is 6 square feet. Now let me move on to poster B. Area equals length times width. So the area would be 5 feet times 1 feet, which equals 5 square feet. So poster A is 6 square feet. Poster B is 5 square feet. So which one will take up more space on my wall? That would be, again, poster B. And now my final question says, how much space will both posters cover in all? I'm going to combine it. Well, poster A was 10 feet. Poster B was 12 feet, or square feet. So in all, 22 square feet. Okay? Now you're going to try one more on your own. Here's your scenario. Grandma Sally and Grandma Josie, let me label hers, both knit their grandson a blanket. So sweet. Grandma Sally's blanket is a nice square, and each side measures 2 yards. And Grandma Josie's blanket is 1 yard long and 3 yards wide. So my first question says, whose blanket, so it's going to be a person, will cover up more space? Keyword there being cover. So take about 15 to 20 seconds. Whose blanket will take up more or cover more space? All right, so this is an area question. So area equals length times width. So for Grandma Sally, I have a blanket that's 2 yards times 2 yards. So the area for Grandma Sally's blanket is 4 square yards. Okay, 2 times 2. Now for Grandma Josie, I have a length, so it's length times width. I have a length of 1 yard times a width of 3 yards. So the area would be 3 square yards. So back to the question of whose blanket will cover more. That would be Grandma Sally's, because it's 4 square feet. Grandma Josie's is just 3. So Grandma Sally. And the second part of this question, if they both wanted to add a black border around the outside of the blanket, whose would need more border? So take a second, look for some keywords. Ask yourself, is this an area question or a perimeter question? Okay, hopefully you saw the keyword border. And also there was another keyword, outside. So this tells me it's a perimeter question. So now try to answer. Who needs more border to cover the perimeter? Okay, so perimeter equals length plus length plus width plus width. So for Grandma Sally, length plus length plus width means 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 because it's a square. So the perimeter of Grandma Sally's is going to be 8 yards. That's how much border she'll need. Now for Grandma Josie, I have length plus width plus width. So it's going to be 1 plus 1 plus 3 plus 3. Well, 1 plus 1 is 2. 3 plus 3 is 6. 2 plus 6 is 8. Aha! Trick question. They will need the same amount of border because both perimeters equal 8 yards. Okay? So these are some problem-solving questions you might have to work through. Always use a pen and pencil when you're paper and pencil when you're doing these, so you can really draw out the problem, show your steps, write down your equations. It's the most important part about area and perimeter. All right, keep up the good work. Great to see you guys, and I'll be back next week with some more lessons. Have a great day, Stuart.